Slap. I didn't expect this, and the slap made me stagger, my ears ringing. "What was that for?" I shouted. "Wait, I need to go back a few weeks and explain a few things, otherwise nothing will be clear." I entered the house from the garage and went into the kitchen, a little after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when I usually return from work. The company I work for has several clients in the UK, so I start work at 7 in the morning every day to give myself some time to cross paths with them. It took me a while to get used to this schedule, but now I love it. When I walked into the kitchen, I instinctively glanced at our message board, but the only message I saw was, "Working late." Damn, I guess I'll have to eat dinner alone again. When Anne and I were first married and living in that small apartment, we hung a chalkboard on the kitchen wall to coordinate our schedules, and when we bought the house, we continued this tradition. At first, we left each other embarrassing love notes. I remember leaving her a message one day, "I can't wait to get home from work, Cookie. I already miss you." When I got home that afternoon, she texted, "I miss you more and don't call me Cookie." We first met in a small bakery, and that's when I started calling her Cookie. Now that she was successful, she didn't want others to know my nickname for her, but it was hard for me to break the habit. Yes, I know that the notes and the nickname sound a little saccharine, but they meant a lot to me, especially now, when the syrup in our relationship seemed to have lost its sweetness. Lately, I've been lucky if I can find a quick message about what she'll be doing and when she'll be coming home. Or, as today, simply working late. I'm not naive. I know that even the most brilliant gems lose their sparkle over time, and that routine and familiarity can dull the spark of new love. But over the past year, I've felt that it's not just routine that's changing in our relationship. It wasn't just that we stopped leaving love notes for each other. It got to the point where we almost never spent time together. My work schedule was part of the problem, of course. On weekdays, I left for the office long before she got out of bed. But her work made the problem worse. You see, Anne is a realtor, and although her office is open during regular hours, she is actually at the mercy of any seller or buyer. Want to make an offer on a house at 9 p.m., Anne will come to you to help with the documents. Selling your home, Anne is organizing an open day that will keep her busy all day on Saturday or Sunday. You get the picture. But that is not all. 2 years ago, Anne decided to run for a seat on the city council in our district. I did my best to dissuade her, but her friends and colleagues continued to encourage her. I wasn't too worried at the time because our longtime councilor got 2/3 of the vote in the last election. But midway through the campaign, his wife suffered a stroke and he withdrew his candidacy to care for her. Before I knew what was happening, my wife took a seat on the city council. This, of course, led to a new burden of responsibility for her. It wasn't just the monthly council meetings. Soon, Anne also began meeting with constituents, participating in task forces, and doing everything that elected officials do. When I stood at the hotel podium with her on election night when she won re-election, I was proud of her success. When I saw how happy she was with her new responsibility, I was happy for her. But as the weeks passed, the time we spent together continued to dwindle. When I tried to raise the issue, she became defensive, accusing me of being jealous and not being supportive. This would all be bad enough, but over the past year, I have noticed a change in her attitude. It wasn't just that she seemed colder to me. Lately, when we were together, I felt her condescension bordering on contempt. Nothing explicit, understood, just a feeling that I had. With so much time spent alone, I've been thinking a lot about our situation. No wonder it sent me to a bad place. I was irritated at the loss of time together and resentful of the demands on her that stood between us. I still remember one evening when we began to show tenderness to each other. We had just gone to the bedroom when the phone rang. You guessed it. It was one of her real estate clients with an emergency that she needed to solve. Even today, it still irritates me. But to be fair, I also remember one time I had to cancel our weekend plans when one of my company's largest clients experienced a network outage. Now I was sitting on the kitchen table trying to figure everything out. Maybe I'm being unfair to Anne. Maybe I'm just jealous because other people need so much of her time. But as a network engineer, I've learned to identify problems based on seemingly minor symptoms, and my instincts tell me that there are more factors at play here than the factors I have considered so far. It wasn't just our crazy schedules that caused me so much discomfort. It was, I realized, about her attitude towards me. When she first became a counselor, she was so eager to tell me everything that was going on in the council and in the mayor's office. But now she never mentioned it. Was it that the new thing had lost its appeal, or had she decided that I was simply not worth talking to? This opportunity really stung. Suddenly, a really dark thought struck me. What if she was having an affair? I immediately rejected such a vile idea. My cookie would never deceive me. But I couldn't get rid of this thought because it seemed to answer many of the questions I had. What does she really do all those evenings when she works late? She can date clients, but she can also, I get it, date her lover. Why doesn't she tell me where she's going anymore? Because she just doesn't care, or because she doesn't want me to know? Why is she so condescending to me when we're together? Maybe she despises me now that I have become her involuntary cuckold. The longer I sat and thought, the more I plunged into the abyss of evil suspicion. I have to do something to stop this train of thought before I do something stupid and irreversible. So I got up from the table and put on my old work clothes. Then I got out the lawn mower and got to work on our lawn until it was too dark to see. Physical exercises helped a little. I still couldn't help but think about the situation, but I calmed down enough to come up with a plan of action. When problems start to arise on the network, the first thing I do is run a series of tests to find the cause. I need to do the same with my marriage, diagnose and find out what went wrong. Over a dinner of leftovers, I thought about what diagnostic tools I could use. I'm very familiar with the many electronic wonders that make it easier to spy on someone. But the more I thought about it, the more complex the problem seemed. Of course, I could install microphones and cameras around the house, but with so little time Anne spent at home, it would hardly do anything useful. I was worried about the time she spent away from home. I thought about putting a tracker on her car, but what's the use? Between property showings and board meetings, my wife was on the move more often than not. Is there parking at the hotel? She always attended dinners and held meetings in hotel conference rooms. Miniature recording devices, trying to listen to all the phones she uses. Nothing seemed promising. I knew the answer but didn't want to use it because I thought it would be expensive. But hiring a professional was clearly the right decision, so I sat down at the computer and started looking for detective agencies. Well, that didn't help. There were dozens of them. Some had ratings, but I became quite skeptical of online ratings and user recommendations. It's too easy to fake them. Is there a section on Craigslist for detective agencies? Angie's List? Crap. Then, further in my search, I noticed a post about a Channel 9 news story. When I clicked on it, I discovered that they had done a story about local detective agencies a year ago. Channel 9, huh? I studied with Amy Howard, a girl who is now the station's news director. We even dated for a while in college. It wasn't serious, but we parted as friends. I called her. Hi, Amy. Long time no see. Any chance you could have a beer with me after work today? She was pleasantly surprised to hear from me. I think I can get out, Dave. It's a quiet news day, so unless something big happens, I'll be there. When she walked into the bar, I remembered why I was attracted to her. She was still as attractive as when we were dating, but now she had the confident style of a successful professional. It suited her. We chatted for a while, discussing mutual friends and our lives after college. But eventually, I subtly changed the subject. Didn't you do a story about local detective agencies a while ago? She looked at me shrewdly. Oh, Dave, I'm so sorry. I was wondering why you didn't mention Anne. Are you looking for a recommendation? Caught. I hung my head and nodded. She thought for a moment. Given your wife's position in the city, I would avoid large agencies. They have more employees, which increases the likelihood of someone gossiping. Understand? Definitely. And you probably don't need a single-member agency because getting what you need at the right time can be a challenge. It's difficult for an owner to juggle more than one or two things at once. I nodded. That made sense too. So if you're looking for something in between, we've gotten good reviews about the Masterson agency. They're not the cheapest in town, but clients we've spoken to say they're thorough, professional, and get results in a reasonable amount of time. She paused. Dave, the private investigator business is a little dirty by nature, but you could do a lot worse than going to Masterson. It seemed reasonable to me, so I thanked her. But when I got up to leave, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I was glad to see you, Dave. I hope you will succeed. Keep me posted. I promised her that I would do so. On the way home, I thought about our conversation. Damn, so much about keeping my family problems a secret. I just hope Amy will be careful. Her recommendation still seemed reasonable the next day, so I called Masterson's agency to set up an appointment. As luck would have it, the woman I was talking to said I could meet Mr. Masterson himself if I could come in the morning. I'll be there, I promised. Surprisingly, Anne returned home on time that evening, and we had dinner together for the first time in days. Considering what I was about to do, I was nervous about having to carry on a conversation with her. But there was no need to worry. She spent the entire evening indignant at the impudence of some businessman who was thinking about opposing her in the next election. I didn't have to say much or pretend. The next morning, I got up early and skipped breakfast so as not to be late for the meeting. After leaving a note for Anne on our message board, I got into the car and drove downtown. To my surprise, the traffic was light and I arrived earlier than expected. I double-checked the address of Masterson's agency and realized that it was located next to my favorite coffee shop, Stranger Brew. When this place opened 10 years ago, there was a lot of talk about the name and its meaning. Some people believed that it reflected the unique blend of homemade coffee. Others swore that the new owner was a former hippie with a sense of humor. But Anne checked the records at the town hall and discovered that the owner's name was Joe Stranger. Either way, Stranger Brew was much better than the big coffee chains in my opinion. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who liked this place. Even at this early hour, I was lucky to find a place when I got there. More and more customers continued to arrive as I sat sipping my coffee and eating my breakfast sandwich. Suddenly, there was a noise from the table next to me, and I looked up to see a large, red-faced man yelling at a young Hispanic woman sitting alone. "Are you finished yet? What right do you have to occupy a table when other people want to sit down?" The young woman sat silently, clearly stunned by the man's sudden outburst. This seemed to anger her accuser even more. "You're a damn Mexican, aren't you? I bet you're a damn illegal. First you come and take our work, now you occupy a table in my cafe. Why don't you swim back home across the Rio Grande where you belong?" He reached out and knocked her coffee onto the floor. I stood up and walked over before I could think, standing between the woman's desk and the man's. "Why don't you leave her alone? She was here before you and has every right to this table. You need to buy her a new cup of coffee and apologize for the insult." The man's face became even redder, and I braced myself, expecting him to attack me. But his eyes suddenly shifted to something behind me, and when I looked back, I saw the owner standing. Joe isn't a big guy, but he was holding a snub of a pool cue. "You," he barked at my opponent, "leave my cafe and don't come back. You have no right to try to bully one of my clients, and I certainly don't need your business." I thought the man would decide to start a fight, but he looked at Joe's cue, then back at me, and finally decided not to risk it. "Okay," he shouted as he left the cafe. "I'm glad to leave. This place sucks as it is." When the noise died down, I turned to the shocked woman. "I'm so sorry this happened, miss. Can I buy you another cup?" The woman looked at me shyly. "You don't know me, why did you do this?" I shrugged. "Don't know. I guess I hate bullies and racists." She smiled and extended her hand. "Well, I'm Maria Elena Alvarez, and I'm very grateful for what you did. There are many people who don't share your feelings, and even fewer who will step in to help a stranger. Please, Maria Elena. I'm David Davis, and I was just glad to be able to help." Joe immediately returned with 2 cups of coffee. I brought a fresh cup for each of you. I apologize for what happened, and I hope that you will feel comfortable coming here in the future. We assured him that we would be back, and then Maria looked at me. Do you mind having coffee with me? This will free up your table for others. If you'd like some company, I'd be happy to join you. I sat down with her, and we started chatting while sipping hot coffee from paper cups. She shook her head sadly. It was only by chance that I ended up here. I'm starting a new job nearby and came early so as not to be late on the first day. She took another sip and looked at me. Do you come here often? Not as often as I would like. Actually, I have a meeting this morning about some, personal matters, and I didn't want to be late either. She nodded and then looked at her watch. Actually, I should probably go. She stood up and extended her hand again. Thank you again, David, for coming to the rescue. It was nice meeting you, and I won't forget what you did. I shook her hand and watched her walk out the door. After taking another sip of coffee, I decided it was time to go. Leaving the cafe, I walked along the sidewalk in the direction of the Masterson agency address. Looking up, I noticed Maria walking ahead of me in the same direction. When she stopped at a traffic light, I caught up with her at the intersection. She noticed me, smiled, and nodded. Having crossed the street and walked a little further, she looked back and saw that I was following her. A frown appeared on her face. Damn, I don't want her to think I'm stalking her. Then, to my amazement, she walked into the lobby of the same building I was heading to. I deliberately waited a little longer, hoping she would leave when I entered. But when I opened the door, I saw her standing in the lobby with her arms crossed and a worried face. Listen, she said as I approached her hesitantly, I really appreciate what you did in the cafe, but that doesn't mean you have the right. No, I interrupted. I promise I'm not stalking you. At least not intentionally. I just have an appointment in this building. She looked at me skeptically, then turned and walked towards the elevators. I followed her, and when the doors opened, I entered too. She pressed the button for the 4th floor, and then turned to me questioningly. I'm going to the 4th floor, I said helplessly. She frowned again, but didn't say anything. I stayed behind when she left on the 4th floor, but she started walking down the hallway in the direction of the Masterson agency. As I slowly followed her, she turned and frowned. Suddenly, as we approached the door marked Employee Entrance, understanding dawned on her face and her frown disappeared. She stopped in front of the door and turned to me. Good luck in your endeavors, David. Now I understand. I nodded to her. Thanks. And good luck with your new job, Maria. When I walked into the agency's main entrance, all I could think was, damn, now she understands pretty well why I'm here today. Now 2 people know that I need a detective. After giving my name to the receptionist, I was soon ushered into Bradley Masterson's office. Well, I don't know how good the agency is, but at least I'm meeting with the main one, and that means something. If anyone fit the Masterson name, it would be him. He really looked commanding. I'm a little taller than average, and when he stood up, I had to lift my head to look at him. Plus, he was built like a defensive lineman. I felt a little intimidated. When we shook hands and I began to explain why I came to him, he quickly put me at ease with his professionalism. Skillfully, he walked me through a series of questions about my wife, my suspicions, her habits, and a number of other factors that I probably wouldn't have thought of. This guy really knows his stuff. After half an hour of discussion, he sat back in his chair. The fact that your wife is on the board actually makes things easier. She was used to being in public and having strangers around her. Surveillance shouldn't be a problem. Alarm bells rang in my mind. Your people need to be careful. If it becomes known that I hired her to pursue her, it could cause a big political scandal. He smiled like a used car salesman. Mr. Davis, we pride ourselves on our discretion and professionalism. Your wife and the people around her will have no idea that she is being followed. I still wasn't convinced. So what methods will you use? Audio, video, GPS tracking? He leaned forward, crossed his arms, and looked at me with a piercing gaze. I'm not going to answer your question because I don't want you to look for observers or devices. I've seen clients ruin weeks of work when they inadvertently warned their spouse. Then he frowned. Moreover, I don't want you to try to do any surveillance on your own. You should follow your normal routine for the next 2 weeks and behave completely normally around your wife. We are professionals. We don't need help, and certainly don't need amateurs getting in the way. Clear? I shrank in my chair. Absolutely. Then it dawned on me that he had said something else. You said 2 weeks. Do you think you can get what you need in just 2 weeks? He relaxed and smiled again. You told me that you have noticed a change in your wife's behavior over the past 6 months. This tells me that if she really is having an affair, it is now in its hottest phase. She will want to see him or her as often as possible. At the same time, now she is confident that everything is working out for her. I fully expect that we will be able to give you a final answer in 2 weeks. At the very least, we will be able to alert you to any suspicious behavior that requires further monitoring. I couldn't help but be impressed. Not only did this man seem to have the necessary skills for the job, but he was also a good judge of human nature. I think I picked the right diagnostic tool for the job. Okay, I'm convinced. How much is it? Without blinking an eye, he named the amount, which made me wince. I know this seems like a lot, he continued smoothly, but remember, we will be using a lot of people, cars, and expensive electronic equipment. More importantly, we will provide you with answers. You have already told me how unbearable the unknown is. How much is your peace of mind worth? He was right. I took out my checkbook. The next 2 weeks were very uncomfortable for me. I've never paid attention to myself, so I don't know what my normal is. Do I look suspicious? Am I showing too much interest in my wife? Am I asking too many questions or too few? But it soon became obvious that it didn't matter how I acted around her. Anne treated me with the same level of indifference that she had been treating me for months. When I tried to ask her about work, she acted as if she was doing me a favor by answering. It was also obvious that she believed that I would not understand her work on the council anyway. I felt more like a nuisance than her husband. What caused me so much pain were the memories of how our lives used to be together. We had so much in common, so many common interests and love classes. I remember us sitting together for hours and talking about our dreams and how we could achieve them. The most painful memories were of how passionate we were for each other. We passed each other in the hallway, and the next minute we were in bed in each other's arms, desperate to satisfy our desire. Where did all this love and passion go? The irony is that the closer we got to our dreams, the further we moved away from each other. I knew that I was passionate about my career, not only because of the financial rewards, but also because I found my work intellectually stimulating. Once again, I had to wonder, did I play a role in pushing Anne away? But if I did it, then Anne was also to blame. She did a good job as a realtor, but always wanted more. Being elected to the council was a dream come true for her, but lately she had been hinting at running for mayor. I couldn't understand why she was never happy with what she had. The more I thought about it, the more I believed that our career paths contributed to the current state of affairs in our marriage. But even with all these tensions, a little voice in my head kept warning me that there was something more that I couldn't see. Was I being paranoid, or was there really a real threat? As much as I hated spying on Anne, I came to the conclusion that I was doing the right thing. Masterson was right. Peace of mind is worth a lot. Essentially, I spent 2 weeks feeling like a patient awaiting exploratory surgery. I was scared to death of what I might find out, but I couldn't wait for it to be over. Before my appointment, I stopped by Stranger Brew for my favorite coffee, a prisoner's last meal. While I was sitting there, I looked around, hoping to see Maria Elena, but she was not there. Fortunately, the racist I encountered did not show up either. Finally, the time has come. I walked the 3 blocks to Masterson's agency like a convict on his way to his death sentence. While I was giving my name to the receptionist, Masterson surprised me by coming out and showing me to his office. Oh no, this can't be good news. He sat down and solemnly placed his hands on the folder lying on his desk, his face a mask. I couldn't stand this tension anymore. So what's the verdict? What have you learned? Instead of answering, he passed the folder in my direction. I think it would be better if you see for yourself, he said, and my heart began to pound in my chest. Damn, damn, damn. Hesitantly, I opened the folder and took the first photo. There's my wife behind a house I've never seen, holding the door open for a young couple. There is a "for sale" sign barely visible in the corner of the photo. Quickly, I took the next photo. It was clearly taken from the visitors' gallery and showed Anne sitting in her seat in the council chamber. Below was a photo of Anne talking to Mayor Dalloway in the hallway of City Hall. Then a shot of Anne walking through the door of her estate agency. Confused, I quickly flipped through the rest of the photos in the folder. They all seemed completely harmless, the kind of activity I expected from my wife. When I looked up at Masterson in bewilderment, his grim face turned into a wide smile. Mr. Davis, I am pleased to report that your wife is not cheating on you. Not only did she not run off to meet her lover, but we observed absolutely no behavior that could be considered even remotely suspicious. He leaned back in his chair and put his hands behind his head in a relaxed position. Your wife, Mr. Davis, is a lot of people. She is a dedicated elected official. She is a busy and successful realtor, and she is a woman striving for success. But I can assure you without a doubt that she is not an unfaithful wife. Then his face became serious. I know you have had questions about her, and I suspect the last 2 weeks have been particularly difficult for you. But now you can put all those doubts and fears behind you and focus on enjoying your marriage. He smiled friendlily. Most of the time, my job is to break devastating news to husbands or wives about their spouses. I really enjoy being able to pass on good news. You are a lucky man, Mr. Davis. I was delighted. The doctor just told me that this spot on the X-ray is nothing. Relief washed over me like cool water on a hot day. I shook his hand again, trying to find the words to express my gratitude. The big man smiled and took an envelope from his desk drawer. Here is the rest of the bill for our work. I hope you find the money well spent. If you pay at reception on your way out, it will save us the hassle of sending a bill to your home. I don't think you'll want us to do that, he laughed. I don't want to use all those tired cliches about flying in the air. Suffice it to say that I left Masterson's office in a happier mood than I had enjoyed for a very long time. At first, I simply enjoyed the feeling of relief, but soon a new thought struck me. I need to start working on repairing my marriage immediately. I have to show Anne how much I love her. I have to stop taking her for granted. By the time I got back to the office, I had a list of things I wanted to do. Fortunately, Anne had no plans for the weekend, so I could devote this time entirely to us. I started taking notes. Friday night, flowers, takeout from that little Mediterranean restaurant Anne loves, bubble bath, new sheets for the bed. I'm going to make tonight all about her. Saturday, breakfast in bed, trip to the spa, more flowers, reservations at the best restaurant in town, full-body oil massage, and then sex, just like in the early years of our marriage. I smiled happily. This will be good. As I expected, Anne returned home at 7 in the evening after the zoning committee meeting. She collapsed on the sofa in the living room. I'm exhausted, she moaned. I don't know if I can cook today. Suddenly, her head rose. What is that delicious smell? She then looked around and noticed a flower arrangement in a vase on the coffee table. And where are these flowers from? I walked over to the couch and knelt next to her, smiling widely. These beautiful flowers are for my beautiful wife, and what you feel is dinner ready and waiting. She looked at me in amazement, then grabbed the vase. They are beautiful, she exclaimed. Let's take them to the dining room so I can enjoy them with dinner. I hurried to the kitchen to prepare her plate, and by the time she sat down, it was ready. Then I put a clean towel over my hand and showed her a bottle of her favorite wine chilled in the refrigerator. Would you like a glass, my lady? She nodded gratefully, and once our glasses were filled, we began to enjoy our dinner. After a few minutes, she put down her fork. "It is wonderful. You haven't done anything like this for a long time. To what do I owe such luxurious treatment?" Then her face darkened. "Did you do something that you feel guilty about?" I knew this question was inevitable. "Yes, I did," I said boldly. "I've neglected you for too long. You work like a cart horse, doing 2 full days, while I was so busy with my work that I didn't appreciate you. I'm lucky to have you as my wife, and I'm going to make sure you know I think so." She sat for a moment, then her face lit up with a smile. "We really neglected each other, didn't we?" She then looked down and pointed at the table. "This is all?" "Absolutely," I said enthusiastically. "After dinner, I'll prepare you a bubble bath so you can relax as much as you want and relieve all the pain. Then I'll put you to bed so you can get a good night's sleep." I smiled. "You'll need this because I have even more plans for tomorrow." I haven't seen her smile like that for a long time. Later, when she ducked under the bedclothes after her bath, she looked at me in surprise. "Are these sheets new?" she asked, running her fingers over the pillowcase. "The best cotton with the highest thread count I could find," I said with a smug smile. "Now you lie down and enjoy happy dreams." She gave me another grateful smile and closed her eyes as I turned off the light and closed the bedroom door. When I joined her a couple of hours later, she didn't even move. She was still sleeping the next morning when I walked in with a tray filled with eggs Benedict, hash browns, and mimosas. "Don't stay long," I warned her. "You have a spa appointment at 10 in the morning." She shook her head in amazement. "You'll ruin me, you know." "I hope so, you deserve it. Oh, and after the spa, stop by the mall and see if there's something you'd like to wear to dinner at Il Fiorentino tonight." She beamed when I came downstairs. Dinner that night was very special. Anne did find a new dress, and when I saw it, I knew I'd have better luck later. When our waiter brought out the bottle of Prosecco I ordered, I raised my glass in toast. "For a wonderful woman who made me the happiest person in the world." She took a sip and then tilted her head questioningly. "Are you sure you're not guilty of anything, Dave? You don't have a mistress out there somewhere, do you?" I felt a pang because I suspected her of it myself. "Absolutely not, Cookie. First of all, I take my marriage vows very seriously. Secondly, I could never find someone who attracts me more than you." I took another sip of wine. "And I know you would never do that to me." "Never," she said, and raised her glass to toast me. Our dinner was excellent, but we skipped dessert so as not to be too full for what was to come. We finished our second bottle of wine and were both a little cheerful as we walked up the stairs arm in arm. When we reached the bedroom, she turned to me and, slightly slurring her tongue, said, "So what next, my dear husband?" I put my finger to her lips and began to carefully remove her new dress, then her push-up bra, bikini panties, and thigh-high stockings. Taking off her shoes, I pulled the covers off the bed and helped her stretch out on her stomach. Her cute buttocks trembled enticingly. After I quickly took off my clothes, I grabbed a bottle of fragrant massage oil that I bought while she was outside. Gently warming the oil in my hands, I began to rub it into her skin, starting from her neck and shoulders. She moaned in pleasure as I focused on her muscles. Then we got busy with love. We slept so long that we skipped breakfast and ended up going to brunch. I didn't specifically plan anything special for Sunday because I wanted us to have a normal day. After breakfast, we returned home and went about our usual weekend activities. Anne went grocery shopping to stock our refrigerator while I mowed the lawn. Later that day, I sat down at the computer to check my email while Anne went to show the house to a potential buyer who had called from one of her listings. It all seemed normal and happy, like our lives together before. I was in a great mood as I drove to work on Monday morning. The Wooing Your Wife project went perfectly. I felt closer to Anne than I had in months, and I was pretty sure she felt the same. I even left a special note on our message board. "Cookies are delicious, cookies are sweet. Cookies, you make my life complete." Quite cloying, I know, But at that moment, I really felt that way. Work went smoothly, and I did my best to leave in time to meet Anne. When I heard the garage doors open, I stood up in anticipation and smiled as she approached me. Slap. She hit me in the face so hard that I staggered, my ears ringing. "What was that for?" I shouted. "You bastard," she shouted at me. "You spied on me. You hired a detective agency to follow my every move, take pictures of me. You don't trust me. Oh damn, this is no good." She stood with her fists clenched at her sides, her face red with anger. "I can't believe you disrespect me so much. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to find out that your husband doesn't trust you?" She stopped to catch her breath. "Well, what do you have to say in your defense?" What could I say? She was absolutely right. I didn't trust her. I hired someone to keep an eye on her. How can I fix this? I stood there like an idiot, desperately trying to think of something that would save the situation. "But I trust you, Cookie. I know you've been faithful, honest." "Of course you trust me after following me for 2 weeks." Her face became even more distorted. "And don't ever call me Cookie again." All I could do was stare blankly at the floor. My silence angered her even more. "I guess I was right about this weekend. You were only so sweet because you felt guilty about what you did." "No, Anne, it's not like that," I began, but she interrupted me. "Well, if you didn't feel guilty, then you should have done it." Tears of rage flowed from her eyes as she looked at me. I've never been treated so horribly in my life, and it was my own husband who did it. She turned sharply and headed towards the stairs. "I can't even look at you right now." With these words, she loudly stomped up the stairs, and I heard our bedroom door slam shut. I plopped down on the sofa, burying my head in my hands. This is terrible. This is the worst. What can I say? What can I do to make it up to her? I stood up and began to walk around the room, my thoughts spinning in my head. I don't think flowers or candy will help. Now I don't think there is any gift that I could give her to win her back. Present. Oh shit, what if she finds out how much money I paid Masterson? Then she will definitely go crazy. My jaw started to hurt, so I went to the kitchen and put ice on it in a plastic bag. I deserve it. Hell, I deserve much worse. Then an even more terrible thought struck me. What if she wants to get a divorce? I really couldn't blame her. Why did I let my paranoia take over? I heard her walking upstairs and wondered what she was doing. After a while, she went downstairs and grabbed her purse. Looking at me with an angry look, she spat. "I don't want to be in the same house with you," and headed towards the door. I hurried after her. "Will you come back?" I did not decide yet. With these words, she got into the car and drove away, the tires squealing. I stood there helpless for a minute, and then decided to go upstairs to find out what she was doing there. At first glance, our bedroom looked normal, but when I noticed the guest room out of the corner of my eye, I understood everything. She took all my clothes out of the closet and threw them randomly on the guest bed. Everything I kept in the chest of drawers was unceremoniously dumped on the floor of the guest room. I sighed and began to gather my things to put them in the guest room. Looks like I'll have to sleep here for the near future. At least she doesn't kick me out of the house. I wasn't very hungry, but I forced myself to eat some of the remaining food while I waited for her to return. Time passed, and I finally gave up and went to bed. After some time, I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. I sat up in bed and saw her pass by. A moment later, the bedroom door slammed shut, and I heard the lock click. I fell back onto my pillow in despair. After a night of restless sleep, I woke up early and used the guest bathroom to shower and shave. When I was finished, I quietly tried the door to the master bedroom, but it was no surprise still locked. Downstairs, I made myself some coffee, but I had no appetite, so I skipped breakfast. Before heading to work, I looked up and noticed our message on the board. I took the chalk and wrote, "I'm so sorry, Anne. Can we talk?" There was a lot more that I needed to say, but I left it like that. Luckily for me, there were no major problems at work because I would have been useless trying to solve them. All I could think about was how to explain what I did without making the situation worse. Honey, I love you, but I suspected that you were cheating on me. Maybe this is not the most appropriate approach. How about, now that I've fully tested you, I trust you again. Yes, it will definitely make her feel better. After agonizing over this for most of the day, I finally decided to tell her the truth. Honey, I was afraid that we were growing apart, and I let paranoia get the better of my better judgment. It was honest, and if I add a sincere apology to it, maybe it will work. I left work a little early, planning to be on the mercy of the matrimonial court when she returned home. But my hopes were dashed when I walked through the kitchen and noticed the message board. My request was erased, and in its place was written in large letters, "Go to hell." It didn't sound promising. However, I got busy preparing a delicious dinner for the two of us. Maybe we can talk over food. 2 hours later, it became clear how stupid this plan was as I sat alone at the table. Admitting defeat, I ate my dinner and put her plate in the refrigerator. I had just finished watching the late news when she came home. Heading towards the stairs, I couldn't resist. "I was worried about you, Anne. I didn't know where you were." She looked at me with eyes like flint. "Why didn't you call your private investigator for the report?" she asked, sarcasm dripping from her voice. Then she went upstairs, and I heard the door to our bedroom slam shut. All I could do was moan. That night, the pattern of our relationship was established. We were in a state of Cold War, and there were no negotiations. She came and went as she pleased, and I had no idea about her schedule. We didn't go anywhere or do anything together. I was sure that she was going to divorce me, and every time a stranger approached me, I became wary. But, to my relief, the papers never arrived. Over time, I noticed, if not a warming, then at least a gradual change in our relationship. Her anger at me gradually gave way to indifference. She started talking to me again, but only about everyday trifles. "Tomorrow is garbage collection day," or "Was there a letter for me?" But she categorically refused to talk about our situation, and the door to the master bedroom remained closed. Lying in bed at night, my thoughts would drift from one emotion to another, like those annoying spinning GIFs you see on the internet. I started out feeling resentful and defensive about how she treated me. How long will she continue this? It's not like I hurt her. It's not fair for her to shut herself off from me like that. But just as quickly, I switched to feelings of remorse. "It's all your fault, David. Think how angry you would be if she did the same to you. How long would it take you to get over it?" Then I returned to the offense again. Most of all, I felt deep pain. I missed my wife. I missed the physical and emotional closeness we shared. My goal was to bring us closer, but all I achieved was to drive us further apart. I couldn't stop thinking about the wonderful weekend we had together before everything went wrong, and I felt a sense of loss. People around me began to notice my depression, but their questions and concerns only made the situation worse. The last thing I wanted to do was to discuss what I did. I had no doubt about the reaction I would receive, especially from my girlfriends. They would be outraged by my action. Even worse, using a detective to spy on Anne if it got out could spark rumors. This could be used against her in the election campaign. If I ruin Anne's political future, it will definitely be the end for us. I felt trapped in a hopeless situation. I was really stressed, but there was no one I could talk to about it. Now I understand what purgatory is. One Sunday, I went for a walk in the forest, hoping that the fresh air would help me clear my thoughts. After walking along the path for about an hour, I came out to a small clearing and sat down on a log to rest. The serenity of the scene contrasted with my inner torment. I can't go on like this. I love Anne, but we are no longer married. It's unfair to me and her to continue like this. We both played our part, but I have to take most of the blame. Our marriage is dead, and I'm the one who killed it. Strangely, as soon as I came to this conclusion, a feeling of relief washed over me. I took a deep breath and looked around at the sky, trees, and clearing. It's so beautiful here. It's a shame Anne can't see it with me. Then I realized what I had just thought, and the bitter taste of defeat filled my mouth. Caught at work the following Monday, I found a family law firm that advertised a non-confrontational approach to divorce in a respectful environment. This attracted me. If our marriage was irreparable, I wanted to end it with as little pain as possible. I called and made an appointment for the end of the week. I had just hung up when it rang again. "Is this David Davis?" A hesitant voice that seemed vaguely familiar to me asked. "Yes, it's me. Who's calling, please?" "This is Maria Elena Alvarez. I don't know if you remember me, but we met at Stranger Brew and—" Of course the girl is in trouble. "I remember you, Maria Elena. How can I help you?" "I need to talk to you about something very important." Okay, I think I can do that. What do you need to talk about?" No, this is something I need to discuss in person, face to face." "What is this? Some kind of blackmail?" She didn't seem like that, but still. "I don't quite understand. If you could explain." "Please, David, I urgently need to meet with you right now if possible. I could come to your office if that would help." I was about to refuse, but something about her tone of voice and the whole situation intrigued me. Still, it is better to be careful and choose a place in a public place. "No, my office isn't suitable. How about this? I can be at Stranger Brew in 15 minutes. Would that work for you?" "Yeah, that's perfect. See you there. Thanks." What the hell did I get into again? But she did seem like a nice person before, and the urgency in her voice got to me. I put my things away and went to the coffee shop. She was already waiting at a table in the back when I entered. She stood up and shook my hand as I approached her, then offered me a cup of my favorite coffee. I took a sip, trying to figure out where to start. I decided to switch to trivia for the time being. "So, how's work going at Masterson Investigations?" She made a sour face. "Not very good. I was fired yesterday." "Fired? What happened?" "I'll tell you about it later. First, let me ask, how are things going with your wife?" I was shocked. How did she know about Anne and me? Then I mentally hit myself. Of course she knows. She saw me at the agency. Hell, she was probably part of the team that was keeping an eye on Anne. At that moment, all my problems came flooding back, and I felt depressed again. I collapsed into a chair and shook my head. They're not going very well, not at all. Somehow Anne found out I was hired to spy on her, and she exploded. Then, to my surprise, all my pain and sadness came out, and I told this almost stranger the story I had been keeping inside for so long. She looked at me without expression while I told my sad story. When I finally finished, she cocked her head to the side and asked, "When you met with Mr. Masterson, did he show you surveillance photos?" "Yes, of course." "Why?" "What was in the photographs?" I was puzzled. They were just photographs of Anne doing her normal activities, meeting with home buyers, going to council meetings, working in her office. Everything was completely normal, completely innocent. "Why?" She leaned towards me with an intense gaze. "David, yesterday morning at the agency, I needed to make copies of some documents. When I went to the copier, I found your file there." She blushed slightly. "I shouldn't have touched it, but I remembered how kind you were to me, and I was curious, so I looked inside. I saw the photographs you described, David, but there were other photographs that Masterson apparently did not give you. David, I saw several photographs of your wife in the arms of another man. They were intimate photographs, photographs of them having sex." "What? It's impossible," Masterson assured me. "That's not all, David. The photos had different dates and times. This was not a one-time mistake. Your wife is cheating on you with this man." I couldn't believe it. "You must be mistaken. It couldn't be Anne. Why would Masterson lie to me?" "I don't know, David, but when he caught me with your case, he was furious and fired me on the spot. Why would he react like that if he didn't have something to hide? Do you have a copy of any of the photographs? I'll have to see them for myself." "No, sorry. I didn't have time to make copies." I looked at her carefully. "Are you sure you're not making this up just to get back at Masterson for getting fired?" Instantly, I saw pain in her eyes. Of course, I'm angry at Masterson, but I would never use you for revenge. You were so kind to me, you stood up for me even though you didn't know me. I would never repay your kindness in such an evil way. There were tears in her eyes. Maybe she's a great actress, but I immediately dismissed that thought. She's not lying to me. However, I still had a hard time understanding what her words meant. Okay, who was that other man in the photo? She shook her head. I don't know. I didn't recognize him. I was about to say something else, but she reached out her hand and pressed mine. David, there is a lot I don't understand, but I think I know a possible reason why Masterson lied to you. Your wife is a powerful person in this city. I believe Masterson is blackmailing your wife. This stopped me. There were plenty of others in town who would happily use the scandal to unseat Anne in the next election. As ambitious as she was, she would have done almost anything to avoid such a humiliating revelation. Without thinking, I rubbed my jaw where Anne had hit me. Has she been lying to me this whole time? She treated me like dirt and then laughed about it with her lover. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I got up, went outside, and started walking along the sidewalk. Maria Elena rushed after me and grabbed my hand. David, where are you going? I'm going to Masterson right now to find out what's really going on. Wait, David. Stop and think about it. If I'm right, Masterson will only lie to you because that's the only way he can maintain his leverage over your wife. Besides, he's probably already removed those photos by now from your file and hid them. You will get nothing from him. She saw that I was hesitating and continued. And the same thing will happen if you confront Anne. Do you really think she'll admit to anything? She pulled me towards a bench on the sidewalk. If you show them what I told you, they'll both say I'm just a disgruntled former employee. It'll be my word against theirs. She looked me sincerely in the eyes. David, I swear to you that I am telling the truth. I hope you believe it. I studied her face and tried to understand my feelings. She's not lying. She's trying to repay the person who helped her. I believe you, Maria Elena. I saw relief and gratitude on her face, but then she became focused. There's one more thing, David. There's a reason I wanted to meet you right now. I learned something important yesterday. I saw Masterson's calendar. He has a meeting with your wife in half an hour. If you're willing to do a little snooping, maybe we can figure out what he's up to. Yes, absolutely. Do you know where they meet? I wrote it down. She handed me a piece of paper with an address in the suburbs. 2232 Magnolia Lane, why there? I muttered more to myself than to her. This is a residential area. I shrugged my shoulders. I'll figure it out later. Come on, I said. My car is parked nearby. Soon we were driving to the indicated address. I was silent, but inside I was seething. I felt so guilty for not trusting my wife, and now it turns out I had every reason to doubt her all along. This bitch, and who was her secret lover? How long did their relationship last? How did Masterson even get involved? Stop, I told myself. Wait until you know for sure that Anne is cheating on you. Jumping to conclusions is what led to problems before. Yes, but that's because Masterson lied to me. It was difficult to keep myself under control. Here it is, Maria Elena shouted when I drove past the desired address. I drove another block, turned around, and came back to park on the street 2 houses down. Damn, this is a really nice neighborhood. Whose house is this? I asked, more for myself. Then, as we approached the house, I noticed something I had missed earlier. A for sale sign from my wife's real estate agency. Suddenly everything became clear. That's why they meet here. This house is empty, I said quietly but insistently to Maria Elena. The owners moved, and she tried to sell it for months. We hid behind the tall hedge that surrounded the property and headed towards the driveway. There were 2 cars parked there. I didn't recognize any of them. You stay here. I'll see if I can see them, I whispered. I'll go too, she answered firmly, and I shrugged. Together, we slowly made our way to the side of the house. staying out of sight behind the hedge. We heard muffled noises coming from the back of the house, and as we crept up to the house, we saw French doors leading into what was likely the living room. We looked inside, and my adrenaline began to go through the roof. There was Anne, wearing lingerie I'd never seen before, stretched out on the sofa, talking to someone we couldn't see from around the corner. Suddenly, Masterson walked into the room wearing nothing but a smile. I already knew he was a big man. Now I found out that he was big in all places. I grabbed Maria Elena's hand and motioned for her to go towards the street. I've never been so angry in my life. "This bitch," I hissed when we moved to a safe distance. If he's blackmailing her, she sure as hell doesn't look too unhappy. "Shouldn't we take photos?" she asked. I thought for a moment and then smiled. "Oh yeah, we'll take a lot of photos, and maybe get other people involved." I hurried to the "for sale" sign from Anne's agency, pulled it out of the ground, and threw it behind the hedge where it was out of sight. I then pulled out my cell phone and dialed 911. "I want to report breaking and entering." I was walking down the street and saw two people breaking down the door at 2232 Magnolia Lane. Yes, they are still there, probably robbing the house. If you hurry, you can catch them before they leave. I hung up without giving my name while Maria Elena looked at me with confusion. But I ignored her and called my friend from Channel 9. "Hey Amy, are you still covering those home burglary episodes? I've got a hot tip for you. There's a break and enter going on at 2232 Magnolia Lane. The police have already been notified and are on their way. Location: if you hurry, you can get some great footage." "Yes, 2232 Magnolia Lane. No problem, I owe you." "What have you done?" my companion asked, but I waved her question aside. "Let's go back and take those photos." When we returned to the French doors, Anne was still studying sex with those men. Then, to our surprise, another naked man came out from somewhere in the house. Maria Elena pulled my hand. "It was the man from the photographs," she whispered. "Do you know who he is?" I nodded angrily. "Oh yes, I know him. Anne introduced him to me at one of her political functions. He is none other than Harold Hartfield, head of our city's zoning commission." Suddenly, Maria Elena jerked me away from the door and pointed to the end of the driveway, where a patrol car had just stopped. Together, we ran towards them. "We just saw them, officers," I panted. "They're still inside. If you hurry, you can catch them." The senior patrolman looked at his partner. "There are two cars parked there, and I don't see any signs of forced entry." Then he looked at me suspiciously. "Are you sure there's a crime going on here?" At that moment, the Channel 9 news van pulled up and a reporter and cameraman jumped out to join us. "What's the matter? Did we manage to film anything interesting in time?" The first policeman began to speak when we heard it, a loud female scream that seemed to tremble at the beginning before turning into an agonized moan. "Oh my God," I shouted. "He's killing her." Both policemen looked at each other in panic. Then Anne screamed again, this time even louder. "Let's go," the first policeman shouted, drawing his gun and rushing to the front door. With his young partner hot on his heels, they both burst through the front door and disappeared inside. "Start filming," the reporter shouted to his cameraman. He then turned his back to the house and began speaking quickly into the camera. "Behind me is a house at 2232 Magnolia Lane where police are investigating a suspected breaking and entering. We just heard wild screams coming from the house and police went inside to investigate." He had hardly finished speaking when sounds of terrible disorder began to be heard from the house. It was like an old-fashioned movie fight, but it was a real fight. People were screaming, and we heard the sounds of furniture being broken and dishes breaking. The cameraman focused the camera on the house just in time to see the commissioner rush out the front door completely naked. My wife was running right behind him, equally naked. "Wait for me," she screamed as Harold opened the door of one of the cars and started the engine. Once she was inside, he put the car in reverse. He then slammed on his brakes to avoid crashing into a patrol car parked at the end of the driveway. In desperation, Hartfield put the car into gear and ran onto the green. He then turned the steering wheel sharply, tearing up huge chunks of turf, and tried to break through the hedge. He almost made it, but thick branches slowed the car down and raised the rear axle so high that the wheels only spun helplessly in the air. The reporter immediately recognized the two politicians. He showed it to the operator and hurried to the locked car. "Commissioner Hartfield, Councilwoman Davis, could you please explain to our viewers what you were doing together in this house? Oh, and where are your clothes?" The commissioner refused to talk to him, and when the reporter continued to insist, Harold rolled up the window. As the camera continued to film, the two people inside the car did their best to cover their nakedness with their hands and cursed at each other. The cameraman then raised the camera and focused back on the house. Now Bradley Masterson emerged from the house, crouched and naked, his hands cuffed behind his back. The two policemen who led him outside also looked a little worse for wear. "Who is this?" the reporter asked, confused. "This is Bradley Masterson, president of Masterson Investigations," Maria Elena said. "He's a private detective." The reporter wrote down the name, but was still confused. "Who are you?" he asked Maria Elena. "It's time for us to go home, honey," I said firmly, taking her hand and heading to my car. As we left, we saw the police trying to disperse the neighbors who had come out to see what was happening. Over the next few days, the news was the sensation of the city. Channel 9 used its recordings to create a promotional video for its evening news, so footage of the commissioner, the counselor, and the detective, their private parts covered with digital pads, was shown over and over again. The story was so juicy that national affiliate Channel 9 picked it up, and it made the national evening news. Soon there were few places in the country where people did not see most of my wife's naked figure running through the grass. Masterson, of course, was immediately thrown into jail for assaulting a police officer. As he was transferred to his cell, he made several harsh statements about the two officers and what he intended to do to them once he got out. The judge at the preliminary hearing was not impressed by Masterson's statements and denied bail. It was more difficult for the police to determine what, if any, crimes had been committed by the commissioner and the counselor. Breaking and entering was quickly ruled out, and when it was learned that Anne was the listing agent for the house at 2232 Magnolia Lane, even the trespassing charges were dropped. However, intense publicity forced them both into hiding. The morning paper was upset at being passed over in this scandal, and the editor assigned the entire city staff to find out what was really going on. "Commissioner and counselor, politics makes strange allies," screamed the headline the next day. I thought it was all just about sex, but I was wrong. An enterprising newspaper reporter investigated and found evidence of bribery in connection with a number of local real estate projects. It turned out that the counselor asked for bribes from developers, and the commissioner secured favorable zoning changes in exchange for the counselor's sexual favors. Apparently, two of them didn't go deep enough into hiding, because once the story broke, they were quickly arrested and charged with official misconduct. The first thing I did when I returned to my office from Magnolia Lane was to call the law office I had contacted and cancel my appointment. "Oh," the nice woman on the other end asked hopefully, "does that mean you and your wife have made up?" "This means I no longer want an amicable separation," I said coldly. "I'm going to hire a real predator and get everything out of her." I guess it was inevitable that I would get caught up in this mess, at least in the beginning. The police conducted several interviews with me, trying to find out whether I was involved in or benefited from my wife's scheme. Luckily, Anne kept all her funds in a separate account in her name, and when I told the lieutenant how I hired Masterson to investigate my wife, he just shook his head in sympathy. My friends and colleagues also sympathized, but none of them knew what to tell me. We all loved Anne and were saddened to learn that she turned out to be a corrupt politician and a walker. This clearly did not fit. Just like, "It's a shame you were cuckolded." After all, most of them avoided me, and I couldn't blame them. I actually hired a shark lawyer to handle my divorce, although it turned out to be overkill. Between Anne's public infidelity and the possibility of a serious prison sentence, there was no doubt that I would be given a divorce. But my lawyer made sure Anne got the worst possible financial settlement. I thought I was done with her, but to my surprise, I had another contact with my soon-to-be ex-wife. Anne's lawyer called me. She wanted me to act as a witness with a positive characterization for Anne. I laughed at this, but stopped laughing when the lawyer told me she was going to subpoena me if I didn't cooperate. The prospect of being dragged back into Anne's dirty business was extremely unattractive, and I considered refusing. But then the lawyer mentioned that he wanted to talk to me before the trial and Anne would be present. On the spot, I decided to agree if Anne would answer a few of my questions. I was pleased when she agreed. Maybe now I can finally get some answers. When I walked into the conference room at the law office, Anne was there with her lawyer. She was wearing one of those sharp suits she liked to wear to council meetings when she knew the television cameras would be present. I had to admit, she still looked good, but when I peered into her face, I clearly saw that stress had left its mark. "Mr. Davis," Anne's lawyer began, "I understand that your marriage is about to be dissolved under difficult circumstances. We are not here to talk about that. We are trying to establish that before Mrs. Davis was seduced by foreign influences, she was a loving wife and devoted companion of good character. We want you to come forward in court and tell us about your life together before the unfortunate events of recent months." Seduced by other people's influences, I thought sarcastically. Well, that's one way of putting it. But I restrained myself and calmly looked at the lawyer. "When I married my wife," I began, "I thought she was the most attractive, exciting woman I had ever met. She was smart, funny, and had a way of making people want to be around her. With her." The lawyer nodded at Anne and then turned to me with an encouraging smile. She wrote down every word. "For the first 6 years of our marriage, Anne and I shared the same goals and dreams, and I felt like we were well on our way to achieving them." The lawyer interrupted me. "You mean the first 8 years, don't you, Mr. Davis? I understand you've been married 8 years. I ignored her and continued. "But since she was elected to the city council, my wife has changed. She has become an ambitious, manipulative person who only cares about herself and her own goals. She has become more and more disdainful of me and our marriage in pursuit of her own advancement. It was her growing indifference and contempt for me that ultimately led me to hire a private detective." "No, no, Mr. Davis, this is not what we want. You need—" "Don't, Virginia," Anne interrupted. "I told you it was risky. He was never going to help me." Then she looked at me bitterly. "So, why did you come here today, Dave? What do you want?" I folded my hands and leaned across the table towards her. "I want 30 minutes alone with you to ask you a few questions. Will you help me if I agree to this?" "Not a chance." She looked at me for a few seconds, then sighed heavily and leaned back in her chair. "Okay, I think I owe you this. You have 30 minutes. "Are you sure?" asked Anne's lawyer. "It's okay. He won't hurt me." Shaking her head, the lawyer left the room, closing the conference room door behind her. Anne turned to me again. "Okay, Dave, what do you want to ask?" I had so many questions, but I decided to start with the most basic. "Why, Anne? Why did you do this?" Suddenly, she sat up straight, and her eyes flashed with anger. "It's all your fault, you know. I wouldn't be in this situation if you hadn't hired that detective to follow me." I was stunned. "My fault? How can this be my fault? You were the one who—" But she was so angry that she didn't even hear me. Everything was going so smoothly until that bastard showed up in my office with those pictures of me and Harold. And you were the one who set him on me. I was so mad at you when I found out. I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't cheated on me with Hartfield." She grinned. "It wasn't an affair, it was just politics. Harold was a terrible lover. I only seduced him because he could get me the zoning changes I needed." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Why did you need zoning changes? You're not a developer." She shook her head as if I were the slowest student in her class. "I didn't need change, but the big developers did, and I needed their support to run for mayor. As I said, it was all political. So it was just for political support, right? Then why did you have over $1 million in your secret bank account? She actually smiled sheepishly. Okay, maybe it was a little bit about the money too. Then her expression changed back to anger. But none of this would have happened if you weren't so damn nosy. I wasn't going to let her drag me into this trap. What about Masterson? What did he want? Half what I got and half what Harold got. Wait, you said Harold was only involved because you seduced him. Her face took on a strange expression. Like I said, Masterson wanted half of what Harold was getting. And after the first time, I learned that he was a big improvement over Harold, a big improvement. You don't seem all that upset that I hired Masterson, I said sarcastically. She smiled lazily. No, actually, I should thank you for that. Then her smile disappeared. And everything would have ended well if it weren't for those nosy neighbors on Magnolia Lane. If they hadn't called the police, I wouldn't be in this situation. For the first time that day, I felt better. I stood up and smiled at my loving wife. Actually, it wasn't the neighbors. I'm the one who called the police, and I'm the one who called Channel 9 too. You did this? You son of a bitch. She jumped up so quickly that she knocked over the chair she was sitting on. She grabbed the law book from the shelf behind her and threw it across the table at me. She was about to crawl over the table to get to me when her lawyer burst into the room and grabbed her arm. Calm down, Anne, calm down. You can't do this. I'm sorry, I won't be able to be a witness for your client, lawyer, I said as I walked out the door. Then I turned back. Enjoy your time in prison, Cookie. Ultimately, Masterson pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of assaulting a police officer in exchange for testimony about the bribery scheme. In addition to the prison sentence, he also lost his private investigator license, of course. Hartfield received a shorter sentence because he did not take the money. But he lost his job, his wife, and his reputation, and was never seen in town again. I decided that this pencil got what it deserved. I deliberately avoided all news about Anne's trial, partly because I didn't care what happened to her, and partly because I wanted to be able to claim I didn't know if anyone asked. But one day, while at Stranger Brew, I happened to notice a newspaper with a story about her conviction. I couldn't resist reading. I learned that Anne received 3 to 5 years in state prison and a $25,000 fine for soliciting illegal compensation. I was also pleased to learn that she now faces federal charges of evading taxes on her personal foundation. Clearly, the fact that the state had confiscated her ill-gotten gains was not considered a mitigating factor by federal authorities. I rubbed my cheek. Great, what she deserves. Maybe now I can move on with my life. At that moment, my thoughts were interrupted by a voice that I had not heard for a long time. Hey, stranger, would you buy the girl a cup of coffee? I smiled at her. With pleasure, Maria Elena. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.